Hey everybody, welcome back. Wayne here, and this week we're going to talk about the gift of forgiveness. And as we get started, I've got a couple of questions for you. Are you a betrayed spouse, and are you struggling to forgive your unfaithful spouse? And maybe you feel like it's just too early to forgive them, or do you find yourself struggling with feeling like you ought to stay angry because they need to suffer the consequences of their behavior a little longer? I find that those are just a couple of the most common beliefs and struggles that I see in betrayed spouses. The incredible pain of the betrayal may create the nearly impossible situation for the betrayed spouse. To forgive or not to forgive that's the question, right? And it's where many betrayed spouses struggle for a long time, and at least longer than they themselves or their spouse want them to. The betrayed spouse can be overwhelmed with questions like, if I forgive her, will it keep her from doing it again? Or will he have suffered long enough or enough to discourage him from doing something like this again? Or maybe I need to hold this over his head just a little while longer in order for him to get it and get the point or get the pain that I'm in. Some common beliefs are that bitterness and anger are the weapons used to inflict the pain necessary to discourage any future indiscretions. By not forgiving infidelity, betrayed spouses may even notice their spouse working harder to reconcile and to gain forgiveness. What we really fail to realize is that due to the overwhelming pain that the betrayed spouse is in, forgiveness is really a gift that you give yourself. You've heard Rick say that, you've heard me say that, probably Samuel. That's the way we really see this. For those who are familiar with the teachings of Jesus, it's very clear that forgiveness is not optional, not even when it comes to forgiving infidelity. It's not for the benefit of the betrayer, but it's rather for the benefit of the offended that forgiveness is really given. 25 years ago, when I was going through a very early version of EMS with Rick, I discovered that my unforgiveness toward a family member affected me far more than him. And as long as I held this grudge, he had really control over my life. I did everything I could to avoid this person. But when I did see him, I was sure to let him know how angry I was. And I'm even more embarrassed to say that oftentimes I would do that in a passive-aggressive way. I had lost my peace. And just at the very sight of him stirred up some deep emotions of hurt and anger. And it really stole my joy. Nothing made me more miserable than seeing him enjoying his life and having a good time while I was over here suffering. My unforgiveness served no good purpose other than to harm me. And in reality, I had already been harmed enough many years ago. Unforgiveness kept me blind to anything but my anger and the injustice that I felt. If I was to heal, I needed to get to that place, and I needed to see clearly what was mine and what was my responsibility. Now, don't think for a minute that I am suggesting at any kind of level that forgiving infidelity should be quick or easy. Nothing gets me going a little bit more than when the wayward or the unfaithful spouse starts talking about, you need to forgive me. The Bible says you got to forgive me. In fact, forgiveness is far more than the offender deserves. But if I had this much trouble mustering up forgiveness for a distant family member, I can just imagine how much more difficult it is to forgive the unfaithful spouse. Someone who vowed once upon a time to honor you, love you, cherish you till death do you part. But again, it's not for their sake that we forgive. Remember, we forgive for our own benefit and ultimately our own recovery. Forgiveness still sets you free and provides context for a life free from the desire for justice or vengeance. It's about finding freedom to get your life back again and move forward, despite the fact that your heart has been totally crushed. Bitterness and unforgiveness will never bring peace and joy and freedom, and will most certainly frustrate any sense of hope and reconciliation or restoration. I'm also not saying that forgiving infidelity is synonymous with trust or reconciliation. I'm not even saying that anger and hurt should be gone. The forgiveness I'm talking about is between you and God, where you, like Jesus, if you're familiar with this story, where he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." It may seem as though they should be aware of what they're doing, but in reality, it's a part of that fog that they're enveloped in. I know that when I was unfaithful in my marriage, I was not in touch in any way with the magnitude of what my choice was about to set in motion when she and I were walking through the recovery process. If you're the betrayer, please don't say to your spouse, "You have to forgive me. The Bible says you got to forgive me." That's between them and God, or their higher self, or their higher power, or the universe. It's theirs to work on. And you demanding that your spouse to forgive you will only intensify their feelings of hurt and pain and frustration and anger. When we seek to gain forgiveness from anyone in order to find peace or to relieve our suffering and fears, they may be the ones we are actually looking to in order to fulfill us. One of the ways that I look at forgiveness is that it's a process, an event, and then a process on the backside of that. I believe that we have to sit down and mindfully consider what it is we're really forgiving. Numerous losses are experienced with betrayal. The loss of the idea of who your spouse really is, the loss of a hope for a better future, the loss of friendships, the loss of jobs, possibly even family members. And the list goes on and on and on. Ultimately, it involves no longer holding the other in obligation to us for what they've done. One definition of forgiveness is giving up all hope of ever having a better past. The event of forgiveness can be freeing for us. And the process on the other side of the event is to remember that I have forgiven the particular offense when those bad feelings pop up or we get reminded of it, when that person does something else hurtful in the present. If you would like to learn more about this gift of forgiveness, I'd strongly encourage you to sign up for our EMS weekend. It's an intensive weekend and very effective way for you to start your journey back to healing and restoration. You may have heard me say in the past that I think it's 4 to 6 months of work in about 3 days. So when I say it's an intensive, I'm not kidding about it, but it is so helpful. What you will find there is a community and some expert help and an expert curriculum that's got 25 years of history behind it. And then some tools that will help you and your spouse get your life going back again in the right direction. So please consider that. Go to the website, check it out, and let us know what you think and sign up for one in the future. We've been doing them all virtually here in the last few months, and looks like we'll continue to do that for the next couple of months at least anyway. So please come join us. We would love for you to join us and be with us for that weekend. So thanks for joining me again this weekend. I'm going to come back next week and talk a little bit more about forgiveness in a more of a practical way. So please come back and be with me again. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.